If you want to survive, you either a civilian or a gangster. There ain't no in between. Stay in your lane, all in or all out. If you get distracted, you did.
Power Book 2 Ghost Season 4. It has been a while since we've spoken about the aftermath of Tariq being betrayed by Effie, Diana, and Drew, where we saw Brayden coming to save Tariq with them making a quick escape. And I do think it is the perfect time to bring the story together with a recap, along with a few questions around where we are heading into Season 4, because I do think an announcement is imminent. We also have to bear in mind that it is coming up to the 10-year anniversary for Power, which is crazy when you think about it, because you could easily see them going for at least another 3 or 4, at least with the current spin-offs. With Raising Kanan, they could probably even go on a bit longer, and that's not taking into account any new shows that they do have in mind. But in this breakdown, we're going to be running through a quick recap of some key plot points from Season 3, Episode 10, and then we're going to be looking at the aftermath for the Tejadas, Tariq, and law enforcement. We're also going to be looking at a few more characters in a bit more detail, for example like Effie, Kane, and Tariq, and just generally what we can expect. But with that being said, let's get into all things Power Book 2 Ghost, a season which is said to be all about revenge. Season 3 Episode 10 was wild to say the least. There were a lot of twists and turns with a lot of betrayal, which I guess was a very big theme for last season. Every character went in having to confront who they were, what they've done to get to the positions that they currently found themselves in, what they wanted for the future, and who they truly were. Monet had been exposed by her kids after the secret was revealed around her getting rid of Lorenzo, but as mothers in power normally do, she found a way to get that control and power back by putting herself between them and Noma. Now Drew and Diana knew for as long as they were under Monet's thumb, they would never be free to live their own lives. So we saw Diana approaching Tariq to hatch a plan to get rid of Monet, but then Diana changed her mind at the very last moment, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Tasha came in to get revenge because Diana leaked her location to Kate, which found its way to Tommy. So Monet finds herself in hospital after facing a hell of a lot of gunfire, with the blame being thrown on Tariq St. Patrick. We also learn that Tommy and Tasha squashed their beef, which allows Tasha to come out of WITSEC without having to look over her shoulder. However, something we do have to keep in mind going into Season 4 is that everything that Tariq was working towards at Stansfield is now gone. His trust fund was lost in the Western Holdings Ponzi scheme, although we don't know whether Ghost has any more moves up his sleeve, so that's just something to bear in mind. With law enforcement, Effie was in jail with Lauren being Jenny Sullivan's key witness. Their hopes were that Lauren would testify against Effie, and then have Effie flip on the rest of the criminal organization. But after Kane and Drew held Lauren's parents, they were able to convince Lauren to not talk, which kind of did leave Jenny Sullivan red-faced, with Agent Medina pulling the plug. Effie was then released with Lauren and her parents leaving New York. However, one of the biggest mysteries going into Season 4 with law enforcement surrounds Junior and the contents of whatever's on this flash drive that Cooper Sachs left. Elsewhere we had Rashad Tate proposing to Professor Harper, and also winning his race to office. However, his shady ways may come back to haunt him after he made a deal with Davis McLean. Now last but not least, with Tariq finally getting hands on Noma's daughter's details, he made a move to try and remove himself from under her thumb. Unfortunately, what he didn't realize was, Effie went straight to Noma and made a deal of her own, as did Drew, Kane, and Diana. We had Effie telling Noma that Tariq was trying to get to Anya Covington, and the Tejadas threw the blame of Monet shooting on Tariq as well. However, alliances in this game are crucial, whether you have some within law enforcement, some with political influence, having a lawyer who doesn't need the truth to win, or maybe someone who sits right under Noma who's able to give you valuable information, which is exactly what Tariq had thanks to Tate approving the green cards for Obi's family. So Obi repaid the favor just before Tariq was about to be taken off the chessboard. We then saw a fierce shootout where Brayden pulled a very similar move to what Kane did with a GTG and Mecca by turning off the lights. Kane was hit, and then we saw Tariq and Brayden making their escape, which is where we ended with Power Book 2 Ghost, Season 3. Going into Season 4, one of the first things we have to look out for is a potential time jump. From Season 2 to 3, we have to remember there was a 3-month time skip. So do they pick up from where they left off, or will they fast forward another couple of months, and will Monet have already had surgery and been in a bit of a recovery mode? We also have to remember, when Drew was shot, it did put a different perspective on the street and drug game, which she said she wanted no part of in the first instance. She said being in the street game was Lorenzo's plan, not hers. Now just having a look at Raising Kanan for a moment, we also saw what happened when Rock faced a near-death experience. The same could also be said about Howard when he miraculously survived, but also how they eventually realized they can't escape. So I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Monet's thinking the same. She is done, she wants out, and she tries to find all these different ways to escape. Now we all know one of those ways was Zeke, who is no more. So Monet's mindset is just something to be mindful of, I do think where she stands will play a pivotal role in the overall trajectory for the Tejadas. Another key element when it comes to the Tejadas is this betrayal from Drew and Diana. They're going to stick to the same story about Tariq being the one who was a shooter, but I would not be surprised by around the episode 5 mark, which is normally where secrets are revealed, which is when Monet finds out about the betrayal, although who's going to be the first to find out? I personally think it will be Kane Tejada, because it really does put him in a big dilemma of putting in between his mother and his siblings. I'm also going to say Kane because he's big on family. He's shown that he's family first in season 3, and so it really would give him a big decision to make. So that's just an early prediction on who I think could be the first to find out, because no doubt, Drew and Diana will be exposed. It's just what happens with the aftermath. How does Kane react? How does Monet react? And how does Tariq react? But the real question is, what does Monet do when she finds out? Because I do think it is time for one of either Drew or Diana to go for what they did. Now here's where I'm going to throw a little early prediction and theory before we see any kind of teaser or trailer, and it mainly surrounds Diana. We all know how cunning, strategic, and how she's becoming very similar to her mother. So I would not be surprised when the walls seem to be closing in terms of the truth being exposed. She pins everything on Drew to save her own skin. I mean, we only have to look at who the Tejadas are in terms of what they've done in the past, where they've generally been out for themselves. There may have been a few moments where it was family first in season 3, but majority of the time there has been a lot of moves made behind each other's backs. So the kind of snake that Diana is turning out to be, I really wouldn't be surprised if she threw Drew under the bus, and along with that, Drew would then become one of my death predictions for season 4. Now we're still not quite done with what happened around with Monet, because there's also Tasha and Tariq to consider. I know Monet's instant reaction will be maybe to get back at Tariq, because I'm sure she will be told that it was Tariq who was the one who pulled the trigger. But ironically, the funny thing is, Tariq is the only one who hasn't gone behind her back. Each and every single one of her kids, Lorenzo, Mecca, and even Zeke, they were all up to no good in one way or another and went behind her back, apart from one person, Tariq St. Patrick. So I'm sure she will learn at some point in season 4, which is why I don't think there will be such a big issue with Tasha. We have to remember that this whole situation was orchestrated by Diana and Drew. Tasha was only doing what she had to do to protect her son, which I'm sure is something Monet would have done. So mother to mother, I would not be surprised if we see these two coming face to face again, but maybe not at war, maybe to come to an agreement or an alliance. I do think we're overdue for a Tasha and Monet meet, which is something we haven't seen since season 1, but that's just my opinion. It all depends on how and when Monet finds out the truth. Now sticking with Tasha, we also have to bear in mind that she squashed the beef with Tommy, so there is no need for her to be in WITSEC, although I'm not too sure whether you can actually come out WITSEC once you're in. But look, this is Power, and Power Book 2 Ghost does move at a very quick pace. So with her no longer having to look over her shoulder, she can actually roam the streets of New York and help Tariq rebuild, because boy does he need some help at this moment in time. He's just lost his trust fund, he has no connect, no operation. The Tejadas and Effie have also betrayed him, and maybe he also has 2-bit to worry about. So I do feel he needs to take a bit of a step back, regroup, and maybe get back to the drawing board. Now, one of the reasons why Ghost was so great at what he did, whether it be business or the street and drug game, he was always thinking 2-3 moves ahead. You don't always have to attack straight away, because they'd be expecting it. You have to make a plan and attack when they're least expecting it. So if I were in Tariq's shoes, I'd fall back and retreat. Let them take this win when it comes to this battle, because the war is definitely far from over, and one person who could help decide the winner could be Obi.
It will benefit us all when you are back in Noma's good graces. Use the time wisely.
Tariq helped Obi bring his family over from Nigeria, which is something Noma promised she would do, but the reason why I think Noma didn't was maybe because she doesn't have that level of pull or influence, or maybe because she wanted to retain some level of control over Obi. If Obi was relying on her to bring his family over, then he'd be more inclined to fall in line. However, now that Tariq has managed to bring his family over, he's gained an unlikely ally who happens to be right under Noma, and that's huge going into season 4. I said that Tariq needs to get back to the drawing board and regroup, and one way he can do that is with the help of Obi, and who knows, maybe also with the help of Obi's family from Nigeria. I just spoke about how Tariq needs to regroup, but at this moment in time he has no crew and no soldiers. So I really do wonder whether Obi's family from Nigeria could be of assistance, or maybe even 2-bit. I do think Tariq does need to try and solve that 2-bit issue, because having him on your side could really benefit him, both in terms of street knowledge and muscle. But when we talk about death predictions, I do feel Obi will be another. Noma definitely won't take too kindly to betrayal, so I would not be surprised to see Noma cutting Obi's water off at some point in season 4. So along with Drew, I will be putting Obi in my early death predictions list. Now, when we talk about characters being introduced for Go Season 4, we haven't actually got any news apart from Michael Ealy, who I will get to when we talk about law enforcement. But considering we're on the topic of Noma, let's not forget she has a daughter named Anya Covington. Now she is someone who has been listed on IMDb, and even though I don't consider that to be an accurate source, I do think we will see Anya being introduced, how we see her come into the storyline and where she fits. I do think Tariq will be at the center of it all when it comes to Anya, and I wouldn't even be surprised if she ends up being a love interest for Tariq. Lauren's out of the picture at this moment in time, who I do think will return to New York eventually. Diana is a no-go for a betrayal, and Effie can't be trusted, so I do think the ship has sailed for all three. So I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Anya becomes a love interest for Tariq, which then complicates this issue with Noma that much more. So there's an early prediction and theory surrounding Anya Covington. Now speaking of love interests, we all know the history between Effie and Tariq. They go all the way back to Power Season 6, where they did give us the warning signs when it came to a character. She was always out for herself, and look, it is a dog-eat-dog world, and you do have to do what you have to do in the streets to survive. That's what Effie's character does. She survives by any means necessary. So when Tariq made it clear that they were never going to go back to normal, she went and did what was best for herself. However, it does go against everything she wanted. We all know she's got a very similar mindset to that of Tariq, where she's only in this game to pay for college, maybe also higher education. But by positioning herself closer to Noma, she's making that difficult. Now, when it comes to Effie's character, there is a lot more to consider, because she's considered one of Power Book 2 Ghost's most mysterious characters. There's questions surrounding her backstory, who was a connect back in Power, and who was a brother that was killed in a robbery gone wrong. And I'm not sure we're going to get the answers to all of who Effie is, but Alex Lepre did tease a while back on X that we may just be introduced to her mother. So just as a very quick brief recap, Effie's someone who's had a very tough upbringing. Her standing at the back of the classroom along with this conversation with Tariq did give us a lot of detail about some of the things that she's had to go through. Being abused by her mother's boyfriend scarred her deep, and so she doesn't exactly have the best of relationships with her mother. Now that bit of information that they gave us in Season 3, I do think sets the foundation. I do think it is time that we learn more about who she is, a bit more about her backstory, and who knows, if they are introducing her mother, we may finally get answers to who her brother was. Now considering we're on the topic of Effie, this is also where I'm going to tie in Kane Tejada. I think Kane really likes Effie. I don't think that has anything to do with Tariq. I feel like he sees his mother in Effie, somebody that's from the street life and super independent. That's what Kane sees. Kane comes from broken love. It's a product of deep emotional pain, and it holds significant influence for Kane. Brett did an amazing job this season of making Kane more human, to show more feelings. I think that was a great move on the writer's part to bring Effie into his life. It showed a different side. He's not just a badass, he actually cares. He's actually willing to pay for the tuition, as well as putting on a suit and going to jail to try and fight for his love. So we know Kane really likes Effie. Unfortunately, he doesn't know Effie like we do. He doesn't know Effie like Tariq does. And I do feel like he will get burned sooner or later and learn the hard way, because that's just human nature. God tests us all the time and sends us messages, but sometimes the only way to learn a lesson is the hardest way. And if that means being burned, then so be it. He's only doing it because you have to go through what you have to go through. But who knows? Kane and Effie might be more compatible than Tariq and Effie. It's just the fact that at the end of the day, I just don't see it working out in the long term because of what we know about Effie and what she's done. Now, just sticking with Kane, there are some post-season 3 quotes from Woody McLean which I think you guys will find very intriguing. I think it just comes down to the fact that Kane is a mama's boy. His backstory, which we've never got a chance to really talk about during the show, but she was there for him when something super significant happened in his life. It was just his mom. So he's always had an attachment to her. I wish they would have talked about it a bit more, but they've never really got across or had time for it. I think it's just the fact that he and his mom are just super tight. She was there for him when he really needed her. Now what Woody McLean is talking about when it comes to his backstory, we're not too sure. It's something that they've never really explored because when it comes to Power Book 2 Ghost, there's so much going on with so many different characters, storylines and plots, with it really being fast paced. And at times, I do wish Book 2 Ghost had a couple more episodes a season just to really flush out these characters and give us a lot more depth and detail. But it does seem like Kane went through a really big moment during his childhood where he needed his mother, and so him being mama's boy does actually make sense. But let's hope we do get a bit more answers when it comes to Kane's backstory. Now what's next for law enforcement? The major change with law enforcement is going to be Michael Ealy's character, who's going to be playing Detective Don Carter, a rising NYPD officer who was on track to become police commissioner. That was until his wife was killed in a crossfire between rival drug gangs. Vowing to make the streets safer, Carter traded in his tie for a Kevlar vest, and he now leads an elite NYPD drug task force that elicits concrete results against drug-related violence. While his achievements are noteworthy public recognition, nothing can bring back his lost love. So we all know Blanca Rodriguez and Jenny Sullivan fumbled last season with Agent Medina pulling the plug, and let's be honest, law enforcement in Power Book 2 Ghost, they are pretty shambles when it comes to getting wins. They do get small wins here and there, but in the grand scheme of things they've taken one hell of a beating. But will Detective Don Carter change that? I'm hoping so. Not that I want everyone to go down, but I want us as the audience to fear, oh shit, law enforcement aren't fucking around. So Detective Don Carter may be that guy, because they've given him a real added incentive to catch some of the bad guys, because his wife was lost in a crossfire. Whether she was caught in the crossfire between this war with the Tejadas, Tariq and Brayden, who knows, but I do think it is a detail we do need to keep in mind. You know, who exactly killed his love, when and how did it happen, because it is going to be a real driving force for Carter. With Jenny Sullivan, she took a lot of L's in season 3, the biggest being Cooper Sax's death, but let's not forget, one of Cooper Sax's final bit of advice for Jenny Sullivan was to let it go. The reason why Sax met his fate was because he refused to let it go, and eventually his time was up. But will Jenny Sullivan follow Sax's advice? I don't think so. The way her and Blanca Rodriguez went to Davis McLean, we all saw the fire in her eyes. She wants justice. It's just how far is she willing to go to get that justice? That's the real question. You know, could she be the next Greg Knox type of detective, pushing every boundary there is to push until she ends up right next to Cooper Sax? With Blanca Rodriguez, I do think it's going to be interesting to see where they take her storyline, especially considering she wanted to investigate the chaos in Chicago. Does she stay in New York or does she leave? I do feel like she still has a bit of a role to play in Power Book 2 Ghost, but let's see what they do with Chicago. Now last but not least with law enforcement, the flash drive that was left for Junior.
This came for you in the mail.
It's from that lawyer Cooper Sax.
We all know how dirty Sax was playing from beyond his grave with his letter to Monet, 2-Bit and so on. But for Junior he left a flash drive, and one of the first questions we have to kind of ask is, why Junior out of everyone? You can make a case to say he doesn't trust Blanca Rodriguez, he wants to keep Jenny Sullivan safe, and so that leaves Junior, who happens to also be a Valdez. But I do feel like whatever's on this flash drive, I don't think it's just going to be one piece of information or evidence. I think it's going to be a ton of shit that Sax has been hiding for a very long time. We have to remember who Sax was. He definitely knew the dangers of what he was getting into, so how far back this information goes, who knows? Did he find out that Tommy was alive and before he could act on the information, he was killed? Is it the fact that he knows Tommy killed his aunt Angela? Could it even be evidence that he's actually Ghost and Angela's son instead of Paz? I do feel like whatever's on this flash drive is going to be at the center of the storyline in season 4, and I don't think it's just going to be one piece of information. Sax is as dirty as they come, and he may be dead on the show, but he will definitely live on through the impact that this is about to make, which is what I like to call Beyond the Grave. So let's wait and see, because it is one of the biggest mysteries going into season 4. Now elsewhere, there are a couple of storylines I do think we need to bear in mind. It's where do they take Rashad Tate's storyline now that he's worked his way into the office? Will Harper stay with him after he made a dirty deal with Davis, or will she blow the lid with this journalist? The same also goes for Davis. He's now deep in this shit like Proctor was with Ghost, so I'm looking forward to see how far they take his story, because he certainly has changed his tone.
She has to go, Tariq.
Oh,
You'll never get to use it if Lauren testifies. Which reminds me, she has to go too.
So Davis's character and his change is also something to keep in mind. Now here's where I do want to finish on a bit of a wildcard theory, and that wildcard is Alisa Marie Proctor. When it comes to Power Book 2 Ghost, something we should all be ready for is huge twists and turns. In season 4, someone who I would love to see return is Alisa Marie, which is something I do feel was foreshadowed in season 2 when Tariq had his nightmare. He saw all of those he had a hand in sending to Power Hell or Heaven, and let's not forget, Joe Proctor was one of them, which contributed towards Alisa Marie becoming an orphan. So I do feel like there is a bit of an unfinished storyline here, and they may just have been foreshadowing her to potentially appear, because I personally feel she does have a bone to pick with Tariq. So that's a wildcard theory, a return of Alisa Marie Proctor. Now with all of that being said, that's where we are with a bit of a recap, some storyline breakdowns, theories, and some death predictions. So drop all your early thoughts and predictions down below for season 4 of Ghost. Where do you see these storylines heading, and what are some of your wildcard theories or predictions? Drop all your thoughts and comments down below in the comment section, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.